Well, welcome back. Getting ready now to talk about other debt securities. We're talking about Module 4 on page 4. And we'll go into government securities, municipal securities, what have you. And again, one of the reasons why we have to go into these individual securities, if you're taking the Series 7, you need to know like a lot of detail about the characteristics of these things. The important thing about the Series 6 and why you have to know about individual securities is that if you have a bus full of rowdy fourth grade boys, I know because I was one, okay, then guess what? You're going to have a rowdy bus. But if you've got a bus full of very tame and docile third grade girls, yeah, they're liable to start singing or something like that, but they're not going to be beating each other up and throwing spitwads, okay? But the mutual funds, the investment companies in general, are going to act, as well as mutual funds in particular, are going to act like whatever is on the inside of them. So you'll need to know how bonds react to interest rate moves, because that's how the bond mutual fund is going to react to interest rate moves. Now, it won't be as direct, because hopefully your management will take some of that effect out if it's a bad effect, or magnify the effect if it's a good one. But nevertheless, you need to be aware of that. If you have certain stocks, that it's going to act like the group of stocks act. Again, it's just packaging these things together. So you need to know how the underlying securities perform and what their characteristics are, because those follow through to your mutual funds. So let's go ahead and talk about governments, municipals, and money market securities. And Treasury securities are direct obligations of the U.S. government. They're backed up by the full faith and credit of the United States government. There's going to be somebody in your career that says, yeah, but you know how the government runs their business. If I ran my business the way they run their business, well, I'd be out of business in a month. You can't do this, blah, 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 blah. No, I tell you what, every year we have showboating, we have there's grandstanding that goes on with the budget, and are we going to default on our debt? I'll bet you right now we don't, because it's just not what we do is to default on Treasury securities. If we default on Treasury securities, the ripple effect of that through the whole economy is going to be so detrimental. And again, I don't want to make political comments, but people in Washington know that. They'll act like they don't. They know it. Okay? Full faith and credit of the U.S. government means that it's the safest securities in the world. All right, it sets the standard. You've got several different types of bonds. You've got savings bonds, or Liberty bonds, as they're now called. And I'd just be familiar with the term, because these are non-negotiable. Well, if you can't buy them or sell them in your business, you just need to know that they're there. So the double E bonds are zero coupons. That's what Grandma bought you. She paid $12.50 for a $25 bond. Okay, so anyway, Series Double H, they don't actually issue those anymore, but they will pay interest. And what you do is you'd trade in, if you held your savings bonds all the way through to your retirement. Okay, you'd cash them in, or not cash them in, but exchange them for the Double H. But again, they're non-negotiable. That term matches up with the term redeemable. You've got to take them down and look on a schedule and see what they're worth, not look in a marketplace. Now, Treasury bills, just like your electric bill, okay, it's due this month. Well, guess what? Treasury bills are going to be short term. They're going to be due in 4-week, 13-week, 26-week, and 52 weeks. You'll hear it colloquially like 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, and a year, but it actually is that number of weeks. But they're issued at a discount, and they mature at par, which makes sense, because like with corporate bonds, we had coupons attached, and that coupon covered a 6-month period. Well, why would we put 1/6 of a coupon on an instant? That just doesn't make any sense. And so, like I say, we buy them at a discount, and then they mature at their par value of $1,000. Now, Treasury notes pick up where Treasury bills leave off. Okay, you get 1 year on Treasury bills. You start out at 2 years, out to 10 years on your Treasury notes. And they're issued at par, and they pay interest every 6 months. Now, you may have a question that says, what's the maximum maturity on Treasury notes? I've heard this question before, and so there we go. What I do, in case I forget, is that I just kind of misspell it. I take my first letter and my last letter, and I switch them. And I say, oh, Treasury notes, why those are so 10. Okay, all right. I didn't say that the jokes were good, okay? And I'll never make it on the stand-up circuit, but by golly, you'll remember the SO 10. And if it shows up on your test, that's the maximum maturity on Treasury notes. And then Treasury bonds pick up where Treasury notes leave off. They'll go on out to 30 years maturity. Again, they're issued at par, pay interest semi-annually. There's what we call comparative yield curves. Now, one thing that was really comforting to me is that your yield curve doesn't have to curve, okay? So what I like to do is I just like to go so, all right? Because the longer I go in time, then the more that if I'm a borrower I'm going to have to pay, the more as a lender I'm going to demand to get, okay? And now if this is Treasuries and they have the lowest risk, they're also going to have the lowest yield. So if I have a corporate, there we go. And I've got a spread between the two. The word spread just means difference. And any time that you have a difference, you've got a spread. And that spread is like so. Now here's what you're going to see on the test. What happens if this spread widens? It was like so, now it's like that much. Why did it do that? Well, it's going to widen if people expect the economy to worsen. It'll widen if we expect the economy to worsen. The reason for that is that if we expect a poor economy, then there's going to be more risk in the corporates. Or what's going to happen is that we're going to demand, we're going to take the corporates and put that money that we would have invested in corporates, put it into treasuries. That demand for treasuries is going to push that yield down. But either way, whether it's this one going up or that one going down, usually it's both. You expect the economy to get worse, you're going to go to the treasuries, the safety, and so that's going to widen out your yield spreads. Okay, so let's see the government agency issues, including the Government National Mortgage Association. And what happens is we securitize, let's read that one backwards, okay? Eyes means to turn into. We turn these into a security, a marketable security. Now, if we were to set up a loan company, a mortgage company, we'd have so much money and we'd lend it out, but then we'd be out of business. We'd have to wait until those guys paid it off. Either that or we would have to sell that piece of paper that we had, that asset we had, get some more money and then loan it out. That's what happens, is that the Government National Mortgage Association, through they reload the mortgage industry, at least with VA and FHA loans. Now, VA and FHA loans being government guaranteed, the pool is government guaranteed. Okay? So they're securitized pools of FHA and VA mortgages. And how do people pay their interest and their principal? Monthly. How do these pay? Monthly. Because they're actually called pass-through securities. And so that money just passes through. You'll get a blended stream of principal and interest as an investor every month. There's an M in mortgage, there's an M in monthly. You want monthly income, you go to the mortgage-backed investments. Fannie Mae, same as Ginnie Mae, except for conventional mortgages. Sometimes they're repackaged into collateralized mortgage obligations. On the Series 7, you'll need to know all about CMOs and how they work. For the Series 6, basically what it does is it just makes it more palatable to a retail investor. There are other things that it does, but what they'll do is that they'll take these Ginnie Mae pools and then they'll repackage them to where rather than everybody getting some principal every month, which can be very confusing, they'll pay off this set of people first, and then they'll move to the next set and pay them off, then they'll move to the next set and pay them off. Makes it easier to plan. Okay, and like I say, a lot of folks like it because it's a lot less confusing. And real estate mortgage investment conduits, or REMICs, for our purposes, they're the same thing. Minor differences. You don't need to know it for the Series 6. And then mortgage-backed securities, again, provide that monthly income There is another agency that has an M in it, that's Sallie Mae, but the S stands for student. That's Student Loan Marketing Association, and they'll issue debt securities. Okay? But the thing is, they're not mortgages because students don't have mortgages. Students live in the dorm or apartments, okay, or with mom and dad, so they don't have mortgages. Privatized, it's not mortgage backed. It's about all you'll need to know about it other than just recognizing the acronym. All right, then you have municipal bonds. Municipal bonds are issued by state and local governments or agencies and authorities. And so you have something like in Oklahoma, you can't go from point A to point B without going on a turnpike. There's the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority. They issue municipal bonds. And that interest on those bonds is exempt from federal taxation. It likewise is exempt from state taxation if you're an in-state buyer. Now, where this comes into play in the Series 6 is that if I have a flow-through or a conduit treatment from my mutual funds, my investment companies in general, my mutual funds in particular, then what's going to happen is that if there's, here, let's just, conduit is basically just a cheap little piece of pipe. You run wire through it, and you run red wire in it, there's going to be red wire coming out. Okay? So basically, whatever comes in here, that's what comes out the other side. So if you have tax-free coming in, you have tax-free coming out at the federal level. And that's what you'll see with your municipal bond funds because of that conduit treatment. We'll talk about what you have to do to get that piece of pipe a little bit later on. Okay? If you have certain, like New York State, tax-free going in, then you have New York State tax-free coming out. And because of the fact that mutual funds will, typically municipal bond funds will invest across the whole country, what they'll do is that they'll say, well, 4.9% of our income was New York State tax exempt, so guess what comes out the other side? And that's what the shareholders can claim as state tax exempt. So they'll do that for us. Okay? All right, so let's see. We are at general obligation, types of different municipal bonds. We have general obligation bonds, okay, which general obligations, what they fund is something that's a general obligation of the community to provide. And so do we need to provide public schools? We don't need to, we got to. I mean, it's what we do. And so therefore, we're going to have, it's a general obligation of the community, they're going to be financed by general obligation bonds. In fact, if you get a tax statement, I know Tulsa County does this, I hope that your county does as well. Look at your tax assessment notice, it'll say down at the bottom where the stuff goes. And it goes to schools, and it goes to road infrastructure projects. It goes to like just streets. It goes to libraries. It goes to Tulsa Community College, gets some of it. On my property tax, my ad valorem tax. Okay, so that's where it goes, is to things that are, it's a general obligation of the community to provide. All right, then you also have, it's backed by the full faith, credit, and taxing power of the issuer, whatever that issuer is. It's the state of the state, city of the city, school district of the school district. And again, it's for schools, roads, what have you. Revenue bonds, well, let's read that one backwards. That's a bond that's paid for by revenues of certain projects. So like I say, in Oklahoma, we've got turnpikes all over the place. A lot of states do this. You know what? There's a turnpike that goes from Oklahoma City down to Lawton, okay? It's been there for years. I think that I have contributed maybe $10 to that whole road because I just never take it, you know? I mean, if you use it, you pay. If you don't, you don't. But that revenue is the only source of income and funds that they have to pay for the interest and principal on that loan. So that's a revenue bond. Backed up by the income from a specific project. Power plants, another example. Hospitals, they'll allow them to issue tax-free bonds in many cases if it's a publicly owned hospital, or a non-profit hospital. And then you've also got industrial development revenue bonds. Let's read this one backwards, okay? That's an IOU, a bond, that's paid for out of revenue. Where'd that revenue come from? Activities to develop industry. Now, outside of Tulsa, about an hour drive, a real nice community. My folks used to live there. Pryor, Oklahoma. Okay? If you guys have ever been to Pryor, okay, you know, it's a nice town. It really is. But the thing is that way back when, Pryor was turning into a ghost town because people would go there to retire, and once they retired, then they died, and once they died, there wasn't anybody coming in to take their place. Well, the city father said, we got to do something about this. So what they did, they got together with the state. They said, okay, let's buy this huge parcel of land down south of town, and let's set up an industrial authority. We'll put in the Mid-America Industrial District. And what do? Okay, they floated some municipal bonds to allow them to put in the infrastructure, build and lease back to the tenants, and now the people in Pryor have places to work. There's a Google installation up there, I believe. They were talking about it at one time anyway. But basically, there's Red Devil paint manufacturer. Pepsi has a place up there. I don't know who else has a place up there. Lots of places because of that ability to develop industry. It was issued by the Mid-America Industrial Authority, not the city of Pryor, not the state of Oklahoma, but an authority. And it's backed up by a corporate guarantor. Okay, so those terms are things you're going to need. Red Devil, Pepsi, Google, those are all corporate guarantors. And probably the most likely question you're going to have is that if you have a question that asks about which of these would be most likely to be subject to the alternative minimum tax. Alternative minimum tax, or AMT, goes straight to the IDR, the Industrial Development Revenue Bond, or IDB, Industrial Development Bond. Okay?
Say that one more time.
Yeah. If you see that term alternative minimum tax, and you look down in the answer set, and it has different bonds, well, look at what we've got to choose from, okay? We've got municipal bonds, we've got the GOs. The municipal bonds just in general, no, because if you've got particulars that are going to be just regular tax or tax-free, that doesn't apply. Right. GOs are a general obligation to the community. Revenue bonds are valid. I mean, think of what turnpikes do for commerce, okay? But industrial development revenue bonds, what that is, that's a corporate bond in municipal clothing.
Okay.
So it's going to be subject to the alternative minimum tax. Okay? All right, and so I tell you what, we're going to run just a little bit long on this module because I want to take us up to the next breaking point there at Module 5. So bear with me just a little bit and we'll go through the rest of this, okay? You've got taxable equivalent yield. Now, taxable equivalent yield is something that there are certain questions that I want you to solve for the question, okay? Not the answer, but the question. This is one of them. All right, here's the situation that we've got. We get this much money on a tax-free bond, and we get to keep it all. If we bought a corporate, we'd have to get this much because we have to throw this much away in tax. So let's say that the tax rate is 30%. How much do we keep? 70%. Okay? Does that make sense? Yeah, that makes perfect sense to us, okay? The thing is that in order to get that going backwards, it doesn't make sense. But there are only 4 possible answers to what is this overall yield, the taxable equivalent yield. You know what those 4 answers are? A, B, C, and D. So if this makes sense, then I can take 0.7 times A, and does it equal this that's given to me in the question? If it does, you pick it, you go to the next question. If it doesn't, you go 0.7 times B, 0.7 times C. And the worst that you're going to have to do is 4 times. Some of them you can throw out just by looking at them. If you got one that's less than this, whatever's in, it is in the question. Throw it out. Don't even bother. Okay? Got one that's double, and you're talking about 0.7. That's not right. Okay? So just like I said, A, B, C, and D. 0.7. That's it. Solve for this, because this is given to you in the question. Don't even mess with it. You're not there for right answers. You're there for right letters. All right, then finally, money market instruments. They're high yield, high grade debt maturing in 1 year or less. And so really, again, just knowing that they're, well, what have we got so far? Remember, we talked about this. So you've got stable prices in the secondary market, okay? And that's what they're there for, is security and liquidity. Commercial paper, it's like a giant corporate credit card. I mean, really, if you run your credit cards for more than 9 months, you probably need to look at your finances again, don't you? Yeah. Okay, that's what corporations do. They issue commercial paper. It's like a credit card that big. They'll get a cash advance on it. And then bankers' acceptances. If you see a question on bankers' acceptances, what you want to do is to do a term matchup. Okay, because bankers' acceptances go together with import-export trade. Okay, it can be phrased slightly differently, but somehow or another, it's going to be stuff going from here, there, coming back over this something, one way or the other. All right, and basically that's all you need to know for the Series 6. Negotiable CDs, certificates of deposit, if it's less than $100,000, it's just the regular CD that you get. If it's over $100,000, then it's what we say negotiable was tradable. And it trades in the secondary market, specifically in the money market. So negotiable CDs, and a lot of these things are like extra huge, but like I say, 100,000 and up are negotiable. Then treasury bills, those are what? High grade? Absolutely. No credit risk. Okay. It's short term, maturing in a year or less. Man, that just defines treasury bills. But what about that 30-year treasury bond that was issued 29 years ago? It's high grade. It's less than a year to maturity now. So although it doesn't turn into a treasury bill, it stays a bond. It doesn't change its stripes. It just changes the marketplace in which it trades. It moves from the capital or long-term markets to the money or short-term marketplace. Okay? So like I say, any treasury with 1 year or less to go. And then repurchase agreements and reverse repurchase repos and reverse repos. Again, just recognizing the terms. The Federal Reserve Board will use these. Banks will use them to meet their cash reserve requirements. But those repos and reverse repos, typically overnight, man, that's short term. And they're just almost ironclad. So they're going to meet the requirements. They're going to trade in the money market. And then Fed funds, which is overnight borrowing between banks. Again, just overnight, short term, and bank to bank, it's going to be very, very high quality. So in any event, those are the things that trade in the money market. That pretty well wraps us up with the other securities. We'll talk in Module 5 then about some other securities and trading markets, what have you. So we'll see you back in just a few minutes. Thanks again.